Hello, this is Encounters with Life. I'm Sean Abigail, your host. Well, big changes are needed in Canada, and Trump's threats of tariffs are just showing us what does need to change. So, these changes that I'm going to propose are mainly about mindset, changing the way we think. We have fallen into a certain pattern of thinking. It's very comfortable to us. Maybe we're even tempted to think this is the Canadian way. But some things need to change. And if you stick around to the end, then I'm going to tell you something that will actually help not only our economy, but will help us to deal with our current crisis in healthcare wait times. So, first of all, one thing that needs to change is interprovincial trade barriers. So, Anita Anand is actually considered to be one of the more competent Liberal government ministers, someone I've had respect for, and she is the Minister of Transportation. But she's also the Minister of Interprovincial Trade. And just stop for a second to think about how absolutely mixed up that is, that we need to have a government minister who is responsible for helping the provinces to do trade with each other. We have free trade agreements with other countries, but we don't have free trade within our own confederation. And there's some very difficult to overcome reasons for this. And if you look at some of the work that the Canadian Federation of Independent Business has done on the matter of trade, they've said that about $200 billion could be added to the Canadian economy if we did not have these internal trade barriers. A 4% boost to GDP. We could really use a 4% boost. Now, they have produced a report card of how the different provinces are doing with regards to trade. And the real issue here is that a lot of these barriers are due to provincial jurisdictions. And the provinces don't want to give up their power, and they would prefer to have us underperform economically as a country rather than for them to give up even that much of their power. And that's just wrong. That's got to change. Second thing that has to change in Canada, second big change, is we've got to focus on getting energy to markets. And that includes not only the United States, but that also includes out to the West Coast, and that includes out to the East Coast. So we have allowed ourselves to be controlled by some environmental fanatics. I have strong opinions about the environment and about clean water and clean air and clean soil and cleaning up oil wells and lots of important things. But we have allowed ourselves to be controlled by those who tell us carbon is pollution and everything we do has to be all about not using our energy. That somehow it's more virtuous if we buy our oil from Saudi Arabia or wherever and not use Canadian oil. So we need to do whatever it takes to work with the provinces, primarily Alberta, but other provinces, to get energy to market. Third thing I would suggest, and this is something I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, but it makes a lot of sense to me, and that is we need to make it easier for companies in Canada to repatriate their profits from overseas. So a Canadian company will invest overseas, build up a business overseas, they're making profits. They can't bring those profits back to Canada without paying a huge amount of tax, Canadian tax, as well as tax in the country where the money was earned. And to me, that's a shame. And why is that? Why do we make it difficult? Because we don't want economic activity in Canada. Rather, we are addicted to the idea of make those evil corporations pay. And any government that stands up and says, you know what, we're going to make it easier for companies to bring the profits back to Canada, they're going to pay a political price. But I think it's a political price we need to pay. The next thing I'm going to suggest is that we reduce capital gains taxes. Here is a report from the C.D. Howe Institute showing that the current plans to increase capital gains is not really going to bring in very much money, and it's going to hurt some professionals such as doctors and entrepreneurs. we want more doctors. We don't want doctors fleeing to the United States because we're making it difficult for them to practice here. And we want more entrepreneurs. We want more people starting businesses, starting small businesses that grow into medium-sized businesses that grow into large businesses. We want more of that. And yet, we seem determined to try to squeeze the maximum amount of tax out of the remaining people in Canada. The next thing I would suggest is that we set our taxation levels according to the Laer Curve. Now, the Laer Curve is a little bit controversial. I know some people say, oh, Laer Curve, you can't talk about that. Well, you know what? It makes sense. You see, the Laer Curve says that at one end of the taxation spectrum, where you tax 0%, you're not getting any government revenue. That makes sense. At the other end of the taxation curve, where you're taxing 100%, you're not getting any revenue because no one's going to do anything. Why would you start a business if the government is going to take away all your money? So somewhere in the middle is an ideal point that maximizes tax revenue. But it actually goes a little bit further than that. At some point, there is a level of taxation that maximizes economic activity. So you get more and more taxes. So rather than just trying to get the most immediate taxes, how about we set taxation policy so that it's generating jobs, lots of jobs, and good paying jobs? Because quite frankly, the person who's making minimum wage does not need a 50-cent an hour increase in the minimum wage. What they need is a job that pays $20 an hour. And the person getting $20 an hour needs a job that pays $25 an hour. We need to maximize economic activity. And while the Laer Curve is not perfect, it's not necessarily precise, it's something we should consider in setting our tax policy. Every Canadian should know about the Laer Curve. Finally, the one I promised at the end, and that is recognizing foreign credentials. So let's put this delicately. Some countries, their doctors, for instance, are not trained according to the standards that we accept here in Canada. They have different policies, they have different training, different lots of things. And some countries, people are trained according to our standards. And what we have done is we have said, well, if you want to come to Canada as a doctor, you need to qualify for an internship, one of a very, very limited number of internships that's available for people with foreign credentials. So come to Canada, work as a taxi driver. Maybe you'll qualify for one of these internships. You probably won't. If you get one, then in a couple of years, you can start practicing as a doctor. And the reason why we've done that, I think, is that we don't want to say to different countries, well, your standards are not according to our standards, and so your doctors can't come here and practice, because that would somehow be discriminatory. And instead we say, okay, all doctors have to go through the exact same process. Doesn't matter how well trained they are, doesn't matter how well experienced they are, doesn't matter how advanced their medical care systems are in their country. They all have to go through the same process. That way we can feel better about ourselves. We haven't discriminated against anyone. But the price we pay is that we don't have enough doctors in Canada. We need more doctors. And we should be making it easier for them to come. And that is through recognizing the foreign credentials of people who are well trained according to our standards. And I'll give you an example. Talking to a friend of mine, he's from Turkey. Turkey is interesting. They have a lot of medical tourism, people who go to Turkey for medical treatment, and they stay in a beautiful hospital. It's like a 4-star, 5-star hotel, and they get the treatment they need and so on for a reasonable price. The doctors are trained according to Western standards. And hundreds of those doctors tomorrow would sign up to come to Canada because of the economic difficulties in Turkey. Hundreds of them would sign up to come to Canada if they could immediately start practicing. We're not going to completely alleviate our problems in healthcare wait, but we could make the whole problem easier if we were to just take out an ad in the Istanbul newspaper saying, hey, doctors in Turkey want to come to Canada, you can practice right away. To me, that just makes sense. But apparently we like our current system because no one can accuse us of being discriminatory against anyone, and I don't know, it just doesn't seem to be the right thing to do to me. I think we should be doing a lot better job recognizing the credentials of foreign professionals. Well, that's what I think. I'm always interested to know what you think. So, do you have any other ideas for strengthening Canada economically? Do you have any ideas about what needs to change? Let me know in the comments, please. I read all the comments. I love the comments. I appreciate the comments. And if you can, if you haven't already, please subscribe. This is a small channel. Every individual subscriber means the world to me. I love every time that subscriber count goes up by 1. It makes a difference to me. So thank you very much. I'm Sean Abigail. That's Encounters with Life.